For the past week, I've been using a beta version of DxO PureRAW 3 so that in this video I can share what I like and don't like about the new software. If you've never used PureRAW, it's designed to optimize the quality of your RAW files using several DxO technologies. What it isn't trying to do is replace your existing RAW converter. If you're already using, say, Lightroom, think of DxO PureRAW as a quality enhancing add-on. Now, whilst these technologies work well, the previous versions of PureRAW had a big problem. They didn't give you enough control over the enhancements they applied. I'm pleased to say that this has been addressed in PureRAW 3, although I don't know if it will satisfy everyone. But before we get to that, let's launch the application, which we can do in one of three ways. The first is as a standalone application. After opening the software, we can add images that we want to process. I like to drag and drop them using my Finder application, but you can also use an open dialog. We'll come back to processing these in a moment because I want to show you two more ways of launching the software. The next is using the Finder window on a Mac or the File Explorer on a PC. When I right-click on a RAW file, you can see that I have several PureRAW options in my Quick Actions section. All I need to do is click one of these to start the processing. The third way to launch the software is from Lightroom, where it's available as a Lightroom plugin. I've already chosen some example files to process, so we'll use one of these to see how it works. The way to open PureRAW from Lightroom is in the Plugin Extras option in the Lightroom file menu. Please don't try to right-click on files and use it from the pop-up menu, as you won't get the best results. When the software launches, it automatically downloads any missing lens profiles before opening this dialog. These lens profiles are essential because they allow PureRAW to make its optical corrections. The dialog then allows me to choose the options to apply when I process the RAW file. If you're familiar with the previous version of PureRAW, you'll already recognize the dialog and options have changed. For this example, let's produce a DNG file using the Deep Prime XD technology. Deep Prime is the DxO noise reduction technology, and the XD stands for extra detail. It uses AI technology that's been trained using a huge data set of images taken over many years. The example image I'm processing here came from a Fuji X-T3 camera using the Fuji 18-135 lens. This lens is often criticised as not being very sharp, and for this example image that's certainly true. Now, if you're a DxO Photolab user, you may know that Deep Prime XD isn't available for Fuji RAW files yet. At least it wasn't until today. As well as releasing PureRAW 3, DxO has released a free update to Photolab to add Deep Prime XD for Fuji X-Trans. After selecting Deep Prime XD, I can set my level of lens softness. If we compare the interface with the previous versions of PureRAW, you can see this is new. Previously, you only had the option to apply global lens sharpening or disable it. There was no control over the sharpening strength itself. Now we can set this to one of 4 levels. As this is quite a soft image, I'm going to set it to strong. I then have 2 more new options, which are correct vignetting and chromatic aberration. These can be turned on or off as you need them by clicking with your mouse. After that, we have a choice of lens distortions to apply. In the previous version of PureRAW, you could only turn this on or off. Now we can choose between one of 3 types of correction. We'll come back to these later, but for now I'm going to choose the original crop ratio. We then have the output format, which in the previous version only supported JPEG or DNG file. Now in PureRAW 3, we have the TIFF format that's been added. Also notice that I can choose to output all 3 formats at the same time. Previously, you could only output to one format at a time. If you wanted to produce the image in multiple formats, you needed to repeat the processing. I can then choose the destination to output the new files to. I'll leave this set to the original folder, which will place the images in a DxO subfolder there. Personally, I'd like to see a subfolder option as something that you can toggle on or off with the click of the mouse. I'll also leave the file renaming set to add a suffix to the original file name so that I know it's been processed by DxO. Finally, at the bottom of the dialog, we have a new section where we can choose the application to export the files to. Again, this is a new feature, as in the previous version of PureRAW plugin, you would automatically export to Lightroom. Now we can pick Lightroom, Lightroom Classic or Photoshop, as well as being able to pick other applications. So if I was exporting this as, say, a TIFF image, I might choose to send it to one of the NIC collection applications. Or perhaps I want to export it to Affinity Photo for additional processing. These are good improvements on the previous version of PureRAW, and it's made me realise how restrictive the old version now feels. After making my choices here, I can click the Start Processing button. Now on my 7-year-old Intel-based Mac, the processing takes around 30 seconds for a Fuji RAW file with these settings. Some people are critical of this performance, but personally I don't have a problem with it. The DPrime XD option is certainly slower than the old DPrime version, but it does render much better detail. Where performance may be a problem is if you have a batch of images to process. But don't worry, because I'll show you something in a minute that could be a game changer. First though, let's look at the quality of the results by comparing the DNG file from PureRAW 3 with the original RAW file. Here are two versions of the image open side by side in Lightroom at 100% magnification. If I start over on the left corner, you can immediately see the DNG from PureRAW 3 is much sharper and more detailed. This continues if I move up the left side of the frame, where you can see the trees are clearer and so too are the sheep in the field. In the centre of the frame, the rock is now much more detailed and we can see the texture there. Then over in the right corner, we see plenty of detail in the grass and the heather has just snapped into focus. Now let's go to the top of the frame because there's something you need to be aware of. Notice the blue in the sky is different between the two images and we've got a colour shift. Let's go to the Develop module for a moment because I'll show you what's happening. If we check the original RAW file, you can see that it's set to use the Fuji ProVia profile that's embedded in the image data. But when we look at the new DNG file from PureRAW 3, that has the Adobe Color profile. This is why there's a difference in the colour between the two image files. Ideally, PureRAW 3 needs an option, like Lightroom, to respect the original colour profile tag in the raw data. Something else to be aware of is in the Lightroom Details panel. Here you can see the sharpening and noise reduction are set to 0. This is correct and part of the PureRAW design. That's because PureRAW has applied noise reduction and sharpening already, so we don't want to apply it again. Please don't think this is a bug, because it isn't. Now you've seen an example of the image quality PureRAW 3 provides, let's go back to the standalone version. This time I'll select a couple of sample images to process by dragging them and dropping them from my Finder window. These then appear organised by date in the light box, but you can pick a different sort order using the drop down to the top right of the interface. All these images were shot using a Fuji X-T3 camera and a couple of lenses. And because I've processed similar files in the past, the lens modules are already downloaded to the software. If I click the DxO module option in the menu, you can see a list of the modules in use. This also gives you the option to disable the lens modules, but I don't actually know what the benefit of this is. Let's look at one of the images now in detail by double-clicking it in the lightbox. This opens a browser where I can magnify the image so you can see the noise in the sky. This image was shot at ISO 3200, which you can see in the information along the bottom of the screen. There's also a small strip of thumbnails so you can pick the image that you want to view. Let's close the viewer now and return to the lightbox. In the old version of PureRAW, you would click the Process Now button to start processing, but in PureRAW 3 we can add images to a processing queue. We can then select the settings we want to apply to those images as we did earlier. For this image, we'll use the same settings as before. Then I can click the Add to Queue button, after which we see the paused queue at the bottom of the screen. If we want to see what's in the queue, we can use the Show Queue button. Now let's select the next image in the lightbox. As before, I'll click the Add to Queue button. This time I'm going to set the lens softness to standard, but leave the other settings the same. Then I can add it to the queue for processing. Now if we look at the queue, you can see that both images are queued and will be processed in this order. This allows us to build up a queue of images that we want to process, but each having its own settings. When you're ready to process them, you click the Continue Processing button. Now, even though the queue is being processed, you can still open it and change the order of the images. It's also possible to select other images and add those to the queue even though it's being processed. But for some reason, I can't seem to get this to work on my software even though I've seen it demonstrated. Once the processing's complete, we have the option to review the results. This opens the image in the viewer again and we can see the improvement. If we magnify the image, you can see the difference in quality between the two states, and the image noise is gone. Back in Lightroom, let's compare the new DNG file with the original RAW image using default Lightroom adjustments. This shows you just how much better the PureRAW 3 image is now. Earlier, I said that the lens distortion correction now had 3 options, and now is the time to look at these. It's also a good opportunity for me to show you another problem you might run into. Let's open a new image in the PureRAW 3 standalone application. I'll then add this to the processing queue using the option to crop the image to the original ratio. Then I'll add it a second time, but using the maximum option. And finally, I'll add it a third time using the complete option. If we look at the queue, you can see that I now have the same image added 3 times, but with different processing options. Let's process this now to check the results. Unfortunately, the viewer only allows me to see one of the images. That's because I made a mistake. I haven't used unique names for each file, so each one has overwritten the previous. Ideally, I'd like to see the option added to PureRAW to automatically generate unique names on export. Fortunately though, I've already processed 3 versions of this image so you can see the different lens corrections. Here's the first using the standard crop that you're used to seeing. Next, let's look at the complete option, which reveals the entire area of the camera sensor. Notice how we now see vignetting in the corner of the frame. Also notice if we compare the rocks at the edge of the frame, you can see more of them. The only thing that's really needed now is to apply manual corrections to the edges to remove the empty space. Now for the maximum option, which shows much the same detail as the complete option, but with the black areas removed. At the edge of the frame, we still see the additional areas, but in the corners the vignetting is gone. Now for a couple of questions that have come up in the past when I've reviewed PureRAW. The first is, can I process JPEG and TIFF files using PureRAW? The answer is no. You need to start with the original RAW file. This product is all about maximizing image quality, and it needs the original RAW data to do that. And you can't use a DNG file either, because that's also been processed. The other question relates to what happens to colour and exposure if we choose to output a JPEG. We've already seen a colour change in the DNG file, which was caused by the colour profile. If we now compare the JPEG, we're still seeing a colour shift. We can also see evidence of the shadow and highlight recovery in the processing of a JPEG. With the DNG option, this doesn't happen because the software assumes we'll be using a RAW processor to adjust it. At this point, I should probably say a little bit about the price. My understanding at the time I recorded this is that the price for the full version will be £115 or €129. And there'll also be an upgrade option of £69 or €79. I also don't know if the upgrade pricing will apply to both the earlier versions of the product, but that information should now be available on the website. I'll include a link to it in the YouTube video information below. Now earlier, I showed an example of using the complete method for lens correction. That produced an image with black edges that needed to be removed, and although we could try to crop them out, we'd lose a lot of the image. One way to remove the black areas without cropping is to use Photoshop's content-aware fill. And another way is to use the Photoshop Warp tool, which I demonstrate in this video to create a wide-angle lens effect. Thanks for watching today, and if you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe. I hope you've enjoyed the review, and I'll see you soon for another video.